This is Dr. Barker holding space. Again, we've been working on a series on trauma, and I would like to continue doing that for a little bit because there are a couple more topics that are going to lead us into a springboard of some other things. And I'm going to do this kind of unscientifically, but because, there are a lot of technicalities when you get into the topic that I want to discuss today. People have been talking for years about intergenerational trauma, and it's come to be called epigenetic trauma. And you're going to see things about that in different places. But I have an article, a very thick article from World Psychiatry here, and there are any number of articles out there about it. We wonder sometimes how trauma is transmitted from one person to another. We've speculated whether it's nature or nurture. In a lot of cases, for instance, children of Holocaust survivors, the question has become, is there something that's been transmitted genetically, or is it just the fact that relationships have changed, our relationships to other people, their relationships to other people, our parents, our grandparents' relationships because of the things that they've endured. And there does seem to be something to nature and something to nurture. So as a way of springboarding into a bunch of other topics that are going to be semi-related to what trauma can do to you, including to borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, I want to talk a little bit about the epigenetic puzzle. We are chemical creatures. A lot of the neural stuff that we go through is created by genetic reactions, and we can be influenced in utero by stress that a mother is experiencing. The chemicals that are released and the chemicals that she endures ultimately affect the fetus and the baby as it comes into this world, chemically loaded with some of the things that she's been going through. Now, we know the effects of drugs and alcohol. We know the effects of other chemicals, but cortisol and stress-related hormones are also chemicals, and they are also impactful. Now, can this go back another generation? Can, in fact, the way a mother or father experiences stress alter their DNA so much so that it alters the offspring and siblings? The answer seems to be a qualified yes. Chemicals flow both ways, and you can be so affected by cortisol and by stress that you can transmit the inability to handle that much of it to your children. This is not your fault, and this is not the fault of anybody. It kind of goes back a couple of generations and impacts things that we had no knowledge of. And we may have no knowledge of it still in terms of how is what I'm going through right now going to affect my children. The role of epigenetics is that the chemicals that are in your bloodstream at this moment are going to impact the way you see the world. This is going to impact attachment, which is something else that we're going to have to spend some time on, because there are a good many attachment styles that will also feed into a lot of the things that we're going to discuss. But when you think about how many times we experience something and it leaves a lasting impact on us. Now, I've mentioned that the actual chemical reaction in your brain that creates a mood only lasts for a few seconds, but the overall effect of the lasting mood, the hormones, the stress hormones in particular, are going to be impactful. They're going to change the way some of your organs function. They're going to change the way your heart races, adrenaline, liver enzymes, any number of things that can be affected by stress, whether it's chronic or acute, can create a chemical change. Now, is there anything that you can really do about this? Not really. Do you have to worry that the stress that you're going through right now is going to somehow be influencing your children. Not 100% of the time. The reason I'm not being too scientific about all this is there's still a lot of wiggle room in this for how these effects are going to be transmitted. Developmentally programmed effects are rare, and they generally involve more chronic stressors. Maternal stress during pregnancy, again, is one factor. But yes, you can have altered DNA that will affect the way your children can handle stress. Now, again, you don't have to blame yourself for this. What you have to do is be aware and realize, as a person who's experiencing stress in a way that's totally unpredictable, that maybe what your parents and grandparents went through might have something to do with this. In a world that's increasingly facing turmoil, there are wars, there are people being displaced, there's all kinds of trauma out there now. We have to take into account the effect that that's going to have on future generations. I was watching an interview this morning with a young woman who was at the Florida State University school shooting, and she was a survivor of the Parkland school shooting. And she said that she had just gotten over the idea that she was ever going to have to go through this again, and had just started feeling safe. And here it came again. That is the world that we live in. And there are people who are continually subjected to air raids, to bombings, to missile attacks. And to think that this is not going to have some kind of lasting effect on us would be ridiculous, unfortunately. And the fact that it's going to affect our children is a real possibility. It's things that we can't control, but it is a thing that we have to take into account. So if your children seem to be jumpy, if they seem to be more shy, is it totally your fault? Not really. Is it something to consider that maybe there's a possibility that this has had some role? Yeah. How to handle stress is something that is going to be transmitted genetically. There is a lot of controversy about this. You don't have to take my word for it. You're entitled to do some research on it yourself. But I want to introduce the topic. The world that we live in, the world that we've always lived in, has been full of stressors. When you think about going back over our human ancestors for the last 10,000 years, the things that they have been subjected to, from saber-toothed tigers to warring caveman clans to everything else. War and stress have always been part of the human condition. And over the years and over the generations, there's been alterations. We've noticed that people don't look the same as they used to, and internally, it's entirely a strong possibility that they are not the way we used to be originally. Evolutionary changes are slow and gradual, but they are nonetheless real. As humans have developed from sort of semi-primates to modern humans, we've been subjected to floods, fires, disasters, volcanoes, all kinds of disasters, and we experience stress. The stress that we experience affects us chemically, and it gets handed down from generation to generation. When you think how many hundreds of generations have existed since humans came into existence and now, it's kind of awe-inspiring that we actually are able to handle anything. But when you find people who are particularly easily triggered, it may not be just a trauma that they've experienced in their lifetime. It may very well be a trauma that has come from a previous generation. It's been handed down. Now, Why do I have to deal with my parents' trauma? Why couldn't I have just have gotten their good looks? Well, actually, I look better than they do. Sorry, a little humor there. But not really. I'm not that full of myself. I'm just kidding. We have to think about the role that this has on not just the person's reaction to stress, but also the attachment. If we think about a person's attachment to their child, some people attach easily and thoroughly, and there's no doubt, there's no insecurity. Some people have a very insecure attachment to their children and children to their parents. Some people can recount, he's always been this way since he was born. And it may very well be that between the combination of just genetic temperament and epigenetics, that there is a reason for that. Temperament is another thing. And again, that is something that there's been no conclusive evidence of, but I can tell you that it depends on the study that you've read, but anywhere between 60 and 99% of your temperament is inborn. Some people are just cranky babies, and they're going to be fussy adults. There will be mitigating factors along the way, and there will be things that will change the way they see the world. There are going to be things that change the way they react. It usually takes a lot of hard work, and it takes some therapy to deal with those things, but by and large, you are what you are. And that's okay. And the important thing is to realize that there's some things that you can fix, and there's some things you just learn to live with and work around. It doesn't mean that you have to say, oh, well, I'm just, I'm a nervous person, so there's no hope for me. Yes, there is. But you have to accept the fact that you may take things a little harder than other people. And that's okay. When we talk about things that get in the way of being able to handle situations well, we have to realize that sometimes we have to accept the fact that we're just nervous people. Sometimes we have to accept the fact that we have fear. And, okay, I'm a fearful person. I need to work around it. I'm an anxious person. I can't shut that off. That valve is missing. Its handle. And so what we have to do is realize that I have to work around it. I have to embrace myself as I am. And all of us have to embrace ourselves the way we are. We have to be able to see ourselves as complete people, and some of us are going to be less, I guess, calm and collected than others. People always tell me, you seem so calm and collected and cool. You must be so laid back. And I always tell them, yeah, on the outside it seems that way, but on the inside it's... I don't know how that's going to translate, but the fact of the matter is I'm able to switch that off when I'm with people. I'm able to switch that off to a certain extent when I'm doing this podcast. Not always. Sometimes I get overwhelmed, but that's me. That is the way I am. I have to accept that. I have to accept that I have flaws. We all have to accept the fact that we have things that we have to work with. And we have to accept this ourselves as we are and to go forward boldly. I could do hours and hours and hours about Brené Brown, but if you have not heard any of her lectures, TED Talks, appearances on Oprah, anything, she's all over the place. And I'm a great admirer because she talks about the idea of being able to accept ourselves as we are, as imperfect beings, and yet to go forth boldly. Warts and all, without armor, to face what we have to face. And once you realize that being able to let go of the fact that you need to be perfect, let go of the fact that I don't know where all this comes from, but I'm just going to do it anyway, you can face more things than you realize. Of course, I'm a therapist, so I'm going to urge therapy. But, I mean, I can't really make you into anything that you already aren't, or that you don't already have the potential to be. I can help you find things. I consider myself more like an archaeologist than some sort of miracle worker. I help people dig up things that they may have forgotten that they have. Find your inner strengths. Find your armor. And then go forth without it. Find your strengths. Put your weaknesses aside. because we all have relative strengths and weaknesses. There's some things that are going to be harder to take for some of us than for others. When we get into discussing particular disorders, and especially when we talk about personality disorders, there may be some heritable component to that. We're not really sure what causes just about anything. People have said that there's a genetic predisposition for schizophrenia, for bipolar disorder. Yeah, but which gene? We don't know for sure. People are always claiming that they're getting closer to finding cures, and I mean, if we could find a gene that we could isolate, that we could say that this is it, well, that would be great. But people are much more complicated than one gene. People are a combination of traits and chemicals and minerals and so many things. And there is, as I've said in the past, no one-size-fits-all cure for anything. You have to learn to be yourself. And accept the fact that this may not be my fault. Fault doesn't even really enter into it. What enters into it is, what am I willing to do to keep going forward? I just had a discussion with somebody a while ago about, my particular triggers, and they were talking about their triggers and the things that trigger us and the things that set us off. We have to accept that they are what they are and be able to talk through them. And communication is a big part of that. Being able to say, I'm feeling a certain way about what you said, and I want to check it out with you. How many times do we just say, I can't say something like that? Yes, you can. And you really should. I think the world would be a much better place if people were able to talk about what they were feeling. If people were able to talk about what sets them off. If people were able to talk about the things that they need. So let's try and make that world a better place. Probably move on to a discussion of attachment styles next time, and that's probably going to go on for a little while. But I also want to get to the role of all these things in the creation of certain disorders. And again, if you have questions, if you have observations, if you have feedback, please feel free to send us an email. You'll find an email address in comments, and let us know what you think. Thank you for holding space for me. I've enjoyed holding space for you. Have a good week. Have a good weekend. And I'll talk to you soon.